Call the meeting to order, policy committee, on November 13th, 2025. Zachary Epps as co-chair. We'll start with a roll call with the members to my left.
Robin Murphy, present.
Mia Blitzstein, present. Eddie Lilly, present.
Charles Williams, present.
And I do want to just check, do we have any participants online?
Wait a minute, share the screen.
Yeah, attendees.
We have 3.
Or board, yeah, right. All right, so we will move forward with the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. And
So moved. Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. The minutes are approved. We'll move forward with the agenda. I'll hand it over to administration.
So we have a number of items, 12 items for old business, all of which we discussed the last time we were together. First one is policy 102, academic standards. The committee will see this item is on the agenda for both old business and new business later in the meeting. So for now, for second reading purposes, you can look at the revisions that are on the screen, which is what the committee saw last time we were together. If there are further changes to 102 later in the meeting, instead of this going for a second reading, this would go for another first reading at the next board meeting. But for now, I think we can just consider the changes that are on the screen.
Right. Given you recall, we had some conversation around world language and do we need standards if it's not for graduation requirements? And so it's great that we have that graduation requirement policy a little later on. I'll open up to board members on 102. Seeing none.
Okay.
Just make sure have anyone raise hands now. All right. We will, that'll move forward for consideration for adoption at our next legislative meeting.
Yep. Next one is policy and AR 212. There were no changes to the policy. The only change to substantive change to the AR was that at the elementary level, the reporting periods are going from trimesters to quarters.
Open up comments for the board.
I'm sorry, I'm a little delayed in processing the last one that we were looking at. Can I just confirm that with 102, the academic standards changes, that is, you said, like, because of steals, right? The science, the
Correct.
changing in language for 3
For number 3
and 4, and I guess
And 4.
4 and
Yep. And 5. Yes.
Okay, great, thank you, sorry. Sorry, 212.
Yeah, oh. Did you have anything? That's assessment, yeah, just have report cards. We will, seeing no changes on our Zoom here, we'll move forward. That also will move forward for adoption. 904.
Yep, 904, public attendance, school facilities. No changes since last month. We were standardizing the tobacco language in this policy because we had looked at the staff and student tobacco policies in prior months.
Any comments from the school board members?
No.
All right, that will also move forward for adoption at our December 9th meeting.
336, new policy on personal leave. And I think we had some discussion last meeting because we made the bereavement leave entitlement consistent with our current CBAs, but no other changes to this one since since the last meeting.
Comments from the board? So we'll forward for adoption. Go forward.
339 is the next one on uncompensated leave. This one also has an administrative regulation attached to it. New policy that was not in the manual previously that we identified as one that we thought was worthwhile to add.
Comments from board?
So this is the policy. And I'll pull up the AR. I didn't know if there's any comments for the policy.
None. That's 339.
339.
Yep.
Uncompensated leave.
Yeah. I think we are for now. And we can move forward to 828.
828 was the district-wide safety policy. There was just cleanup language in this policy. We added some of the training requirements that the school safety and security staff undergo. Mr. White had shared some language that we incorporated after the meeting regarding some of the drills. So I believe that's later in the AR. That was the secure drill, hold drill. So that language is included now.
Here it is.
So comments, Ms. Sloman?
Well, given the passage of that new state law that requires parents and staff to be informed if a gun, I believe it is found on school property or during a school event. Will we need to revise this policy or a different one?
I think we're going to need to look at our weapons policies.
Okay,
So I would anticipate that those would be the ones that would be forthcoming. Because yes, we will want to add the notification provisions.
Any other board questions, comments? Mr. White, due diligence, I recall our conversation around the need for standardized language shifting to hold. Definitely want to, we should that our policy ARs reflect that as well. Oh, all right, I don't see any other hands raised or participants that have joined since we checked, so we'll move forward in depth.
Yes, so next is policy in AR 317, disciplinary procedures. We have not made any changes since the last meeting. And this was mainly clarifying language. This was a policy that through one of PSBA's PNN publications, they had suggested some edits that we looked at and thought were worthwhile around due process when there is imposition of discipline.
Comments from board members? Looks like we can move forward.
320 is freedom of speech and expression by employees. This is a policy, and I think we had a good amount of discussion about this one last meeting. Nothing has changed since the meeting.
Any comments from board members? Certainly track the conversation around some broad guidelines, given the unique case by case situations. All right, looks good, for now. Move forward.
One will recall our discussion about the service animals policy, right? 712 policy and AR. I'll leave it at that.
Right.
Mini horse, miniature horses.
Yeah.
You know, add a clause from all board meetings. Yeah, looks like we're good for 712.
701 is facilities planning. I believe this one was just a routine. This one was just a routine review. The language is all new because this language was in there as an image file. It's hard to edit. So most of this language though is from the old policy. Not many substantive revisions here.
And some board members.
Same thing with 704 on events, essentially non-substantive cosmetic changes. This was a routine review policy from 2018.
Just a quick question, for clarity. Oh, did anyone else have? The question for clarity, I think it was the maintenance. I think it was maintenance.
Okay.
I think there was something around, tracking and reporting. Yeah, it was maintenance, yeah. And so would that essentially be like the feasibility study that was performed? That gave us basically the assessment of what was happening in buildings and things like that. Would that be an example of reporting around maintenance, or would that be something?
Are you looking at, let's see if we can find it. Is it in the AR?
Maybe it was the facility.
Maybe it may have been
Yeah.
facilities planning.
It was,
Yeah.
it was the, shall present to the board on an as-needed basis.
Yeah, that's, it was facilities planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
In-
It was a lot. It was
701.
701, not 7.
Yes.
Sorry, I meant to ask that. Yeah, so is that like the feasibility side? Would that be an example of like an as-need reporting on maintenance needs and requirements?
It could be. I'm reading quickly here. Yeah, and I think you get a lot of this information also through your committees that look at capital projects. Do you have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan?
Not current.
No.
I don't think so, and that's where I guess that's where it kind of was. That's where I landed, was sort of, that was where we looked at like long-term and short-term, like what.
I mean, I think the general purpose of at least number one there is that the thought being that there should be some planning around capital needs in buildings, right? Whether or not that's a formalized document at this point, I mean, I think that is something that the board could ask for, but I think your business office and facilities department generally have an idea of the projects that are on the horizon.
Right, but that would be more like the FMX, Bureau Vista type of,
But not necessarily
Yeah.
capital projects.
or it's all.
Although there's like kind of an overlap.
Yeah, I was sure that's what I was trying to get, like, what level of formality or is this policy actually asking for? And it seems like it's.
I think what specific information the board is looking for, it's up to the board,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I think this policy gives the authority to ask for these things in whatever form is appropriate.
I'm good.
Yeah.
So I guess just not thinking necessarily, sorry.
No, yeah, sorry, Mr. Burdell Williams.
The facilities condition assessment for, like, I guess thinking about like how to make this reality. It appears that there's multiple things that could be happening like at one time, like 1, 2, and 3 don't necessarily have to be independent of one another. Like the facilities condition assessment report is definitely one. You know, as written, and that's the purpose. And the enrollment figures, we do get that independently. Just thinking about like how we've seen it play out versus how we might want to based on how it's written. And yeah.
I'm not proposing any changes
Yeah, no.
or any additional documentation. I'm just trying to connect the dots between what we have and like what this policy is like saying.
And that's,
Yeah.
and actually that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
call out
Yeah.
is like for each 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Right, that, you know, 1, facilities condition assessment report. 2, we get enrollment updates annually, and then 3, that would be like the feasibility study that would talk about, you know, the impact of 1 or 2 and what we might want to do ultimately.
But we don't call all those things a 5-year, 10-year plan or anything like that. It's like we know those things happen individually, so to speak.
Right.
And we have received, sorry to just,
No,
just to continue the conversation, we have received from Mr. Swigert, you know, a forecast, including our capital plans, so in terms of that facilities plan and long-term debt, you know, that I see that coming in there, even though we don't have necessarily like a formal 5-year plan.
Yeah, that was what the FCA, that's what the facilities condition assessment was intended to do. So it was a snapshot in time of the facilities, like everything from, you know, doorknobs to desks to everything, right? And from there's some capital planning needs, but also just operationally speaking, just budgetary projections about what, you know, what to expect.
You also have a facilities department now that is fully staffed, and that can be something. I'm sure that in coming years, there's going to be, you know, deliberate efforts to look at a plan, right?
Yeah, again, it wasn't a question of are we following this policy per se? It's like, it's just like your first question was, well, do we have a 5 or 10-year plan? We don't, but we have all of these pieces that essentially would be.
Well, we do have a power.
Oh, we do? Okay, so, but
It's we have a whole system which lets us know where we are around use of life in every one of our buildings. And what the projected costs would be, the projected replacement date. So if I need to revisit that in a facilities update to actually show that to you guys as a board, we can do that. That was that whole Bears Vista report that was done. So that is in place, and that is actually what we are following.
yeah, and that actually I think has come up in the facilities
Yes.
committee over the last couple of months.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really trying to connect the pieces, so I think that might actually.
So I think as part of the facility updates, we can do a real-time snapshot of where our buildings currently exist as it relates to the 25-26 school year, and what the pending capital improvement project should be based on that report. So I can have that added.
And if that's already in a calendar of events to happen,
Yes.
that can stay in an existing place, it doesn't need to be.
It's a system, it's an electronic system that.
But in terms of bringing it to the board,
Say that.
Kind of
again.
like bringing it to the board.
Yeah, it's just a report that
Oh.
we generate. And
Oh.
I think we need to, because of the questions, I just think it's something that needs to be revisited,
Yeah.
that we can just give you guys a refresher on what that looks like.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, she needs to get something on
It used to be in the presentations, or is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Or Ms. Lo- do you want to just?
that. Yeah, even prior, like, when the facilities director was the gentleman from Australia. His name I can't recall.
Bobby.
No.
Team Bell.
Yeah, teeth, that teeth.
Yeah.
We've had it for a while.
We had it for a while.
Even with, Temport.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm clear. We don't need to say stuff.
Yeah, okay.
cool.
All right. I think we can go to the next.
Last one under old business is transportation policy and AR. I think we had some discussion about that last meeting.
Oh, right.
This is A10.
Yes.
Yeah. 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, open up to the board members. I think, yeah, some discussion around transportation for students going to CBK East, less than 1.5 miles away. Follow up or?
I feel like it covers all the, hazardous roads kind of a thing.
Go.
I just like to point out for anyone in the public who ever decides to watch this meeting back, for whatever reason, that the AR here adds language about video and audio recording in school vehicles. So I think that is important just to simply call out, because I can foresee us getting comments about that sometime in the future. People not realizing that their kids were being videoed, or people wanting to see their kids the video of an incident or something like that. But I just wanted to point out that policy, or that AR, it's in the AR actually. The AR about that is, this is where it is.
Yep. And the authority for that was always in policy, so it's not new, but the language now talks about if that footage has to be accessed or used, what are the procedures around it?
Actually, I do have a question. Is that video footage is covered under FERPA?
Yes, yes. To the extent that it depicts students.
Right, or constitutes an education record?
Correct.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions, thoughts?
And then with that, we have our new business, and our guest of the evening is going to come share, right? On graduation requirements and academic standards. Seniors. Yeah.
I'm glad I saw it to do that.
Should be able to share,
Yes.
just quickly.
Oh, you don't have to do it that way. I'm already in.
No, I just want to see who's here.
No.
Yep, Charlene is here.
That's her call.
Do you want her as a panelist?
It does exist.
Oh, try it.
Right.
We can ask Joe
Probably
to-
a draft.
Right.
You have to go there. Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
Right.
So neuron. Right.
Well, so we are bringing to you a conversation around graduation requirements. And the reason that we are looking at graduation requirements at this point in time is we are in concert with CEA through our curriculum instruction and professional development panel, looking at the master schedules for the high school and for Central Brook Middle School, as well as the elementary schools for the remainder of the school year. It came to our attention as we were undertaking this conversation and beginning to structure what the conversation would look like for the remainder of the year, that our graduation requirements are closely tied to the master's schedule, which could present some question and conversation further on down the line as we are really beginning to rethink what high school education could look like over at Cheltenham High School in terms of not just the courses that we're offering, but also how we're packaging courses for students in terms of creating pathways to graduation, pathways to particular post-secondary career options, and also pathways to college. So we wanted to review first and foremost what is currently in the graduation requirement. So this is policy 217, and we're looking at the AR in particular because that's where the detail is contained. And currently, we are requiring for what is for the class of 2024 and beyond, a number of credits. So we have 4 English credits that are required, 4 math, 4 science, and we actually require biology. 4 social studies, and we require government. And both that biology and government requirements are dictated by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Government is actually covering the civics requirement. Biology is, the keystone capstone course. It does not say here algebra in particular, even though algebra is also a keystone course because we do have 7th and 8th graders that speak algebra. We currently have a world language requirement for 1 credit. We also have a physical education credit and a half credit for health. We have an elective of 8.5 credits for the class of 2024, and then we have 9.5 credits for the class of 2025 and beyond. What we also have been looking at is the last revision of this AR included a reference to the requirements that we teach financial literacy. And financial literacy is actually counting right now as a business course. So it actually falls under elective, but there is language that is moving that as well. So you see that our students end up with 27 credits total, up through the class of 2024. And they would require 28 credits for the class of 2025 and beyond. Now, I think it's worth kind of mentioning what the current structure over at the high school is. The high school functions on an A-B schedule, meaning that there's a schedule for what we call Blue Day and then a schedule for Gold Day. And there are 4 instructional blocks in those days, along with 2 lunch periods. And each of those instructional blocks is about 80 minutes. Our students typically have either marking period courses or semester courses. And at the end of the first semester, everybody's schedule changes. Based upon that, over the course of 4 years, you have slots for about 32 credits worth of work. And our requirements are bucking right up to that at 28 credits, which means if we have a student that fails more than 2 or 3 classes, we are looking at students that become overage and undercredited because they then are eating into electives, even though the electives are required, to get to that 28 credits over time. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. So this is what we would propose. And I will preemptively say that we're proposing this as a floor and not as a maximum. And I think it's important to say that because people think of graduation requirements oftentimes as the thing that you have to hit in order for you to get out of high school. But students can always stay and take more than what is dictated by requirements. I think that's a culture conversation that needs to be had and not so much a policy conversation. But we would actually propose moving closer to what other school districts and private schools near us actually require. Under PDE requirements, the private licensed schools, they actually have very specific requirements around the courses and they are much reduced compared to ours, which is interesting because in a township where we have about 6,500 students, we only have 4,200 that are actually in our schools. And we know that there are a number of students that go to private schools. So in considering what that looks like for our children, we would propose that for the class of 2026 and beyond, we look at English being 4 credits. We would reduce the math requirement to 3 credits. We would reduce science to 3 credits, social studies to 3 credits. And of course, with the math, science, and the social studies, there would always be language in the graduation requirements that, align us to Act 158 and the requirement that students take the Keystone at the end of those capstone classes. Physical education would be 1 credit. And here's where it gets interesting. We would actually propose that health be increased to 1 credit instead of a half credit. If you think about it, a half a credit is the equivalent of 1 semester of a health class over 4 years. Our children are not getting much in the way of health when they hit the high school level. By increasing this, we would also propose and bring to the policy committee and to educational affairs at some point, some proposals for some additional SEL and health and wellness classes. The Office of Education right now is exploring what it looks like for us to put together course packages around perhaps digital literacy, so students understand how to use phones and social media, mental health and wellness, exploring true SEL and, self-regulation and mental health awareness in curriculum for our high school students, as well as your typical sexual education, because right now, if students do take health classes, they're usually marking period classes for only about a quarter of a credit. And again, over 4 years, that just does not, especially where we are in the world, feel like it's enough for our children. We would specifically call out financial literacy as a half credit course instead of embedding it in one of the other course requirements. And we would reduce the elective requirement to 5.5 credits, which would bring us then to 21 credits, which is significantly lower than the 28 that we are currently at. Where we are in terms of, really thinking about master schedules over time, the current setup is feasible because it provides us with the amount of instructional time required every school year for our students to get the actual required amount of instruction per PDE guidelines. We also, though, would like to explore, and we have already been discussing, putting together pathway programs. And those pathway programs would include, especially for our juniors and our seniors, packages or prescriptions for course pathways where you would have 4 courses over time that would lend you into a particular career or post-secondary option or into a particular college pathway. The other thing that we have been exploring and begun talking with our partners about is dual enrollment. Dual enrollment in particular at the 11th and 12th grade levels could be very helpful to a lot of our students as families are beginning to look out spreading out their college costs and thinking about how we can provide access to college level courses while still in high school. Obviously, we do provide AP classes now, and AP courses and AP credits when you sit for the exam and you get a 3, 4, or 5 are portable. But we also have a number of students that, as demonstrated through our data from last year, are staying local. We had about 50 students that went to Montgomery County Community College last year. I spoke with Penn State Abington. They have 6 students that are already committed to Penn State Abington and have gotten into Penn State Abington for next year. We have a number of students that go to Arcadia. So we do have a contingency of students that are actually local. And we also have about 90 students right now that are participating in dual enrollment courses. So when we think about how we are shifting what we think of in terms of education for our high school students, I think we have to have a conversation around the graduation requirements. We just wanted to put out there what we think the floor could be. And then obviously as the board and the governance structure, you guys would make that decision with any data and help that you would like us to provide. But some other things to
Can I
consider.
ask a question first before we move on?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Why has world language been removed? I think I know the answer because
Yes.
too many kids fail it, but tell me what it is.
Yes, it's actually on the consideration slide because that was one of the things that we wanted to talk about, right? Because we talked about the PA state requirements for private schools and that difference that you get when families choose to send their children to a private school and they can actually graduate from high school earlier. Some families make that decision for specifically that reason. We talked about dual enrollment opportunities too, and students being able to accumulate college credit while still in high school through various mechanisms and just having space in their school day to do so. There is a credit impact that we have to think about as well. We looked at the reporting of progress in terms of how students' GPA is calculated. And there is some question around how dual enrollment has been calculated in GPA in the past and how it appears on students' transcripts. A really succinct and consolidated program for us, we could have students that are going into dual enrollment classes, and if we're smart about this, we could have them swapping credits out. So for one of your 3 math credits, for example, if you take Math 101 if it's a college class at Montgomery County Community College, and our syllabi and their syllabi are comparable, we could give you the college credit for that. But there would need to be some additional conversation around other policies that are involved in that. Because there is going to be an impact, obviously, on students' transcripts and their GPAs. And when we think about this being minimum requirements, it's literally minimum. If we wanted to add additional electives, if we wanted to add additional credits in other areas, that is absolutely up for conversation. Now, the world language thing definitely came up. And what we are seeing with world language in particular, when we looked at the data last year and we're running the DNF reports for this first marking period, we saw a disproportionate number of students that had D's or F's in world language as compared to their other classes. There is also some discontinuity in terms of when students actually get to take world language for the first time. And most often it is affecting students that might have some skill deficit with reading. The way that the 6th through 12th grade continuum is set up, some students start in world language at 7th grade, most do not. And a lot of why and whether students get to start in world language at the 7th grade level is based upon their acuity in other academic subjects, in ELA and reading, and whether or not they're advanced on the PSSA in particular. Obviously, that sets up an inequity, particularly when research demonstrates that children actually acquire language much better when they're exposed before the age of 10. We are exposing students that have never heard a world language or another language before at age 14 in some cases. And then they struggle through it and they loop into these classes over time, and they might take Spanish 1 3 times before they pass it. It robs them of the opportunity to take electives and explore other things. So there was a question around that. And I think a different question for the board would be, as we are naming through the portrait of the graduate and really naming the values of the school district in this upcoming strategic plan, is that something that the board will want to explore? Is that an option that we open for K-5 and we make it another specials class? Do we look at seals of biliteracy and creating, because we actually talked about a biliteracy pathway for students that are interested in language and letting that be an elective so they can take and max out all of the world language classes that they would like to. But we are seeing that it is definitely for many students becoming a barrier. And for some kids, it is, they're walking across the stage and then they're literally taking the Spanish class that following summer, trying to finish. And then
I have lots of thoughts about world language, and I feel like this could be like a separate subcommittee almost, or an ad hoc committee.
yes.
Because I think this is too important to just sort of decide maybe at like one meeting kind of.
Oh, no, this isn't even a district. I don't even have a
Okay.
buttoned up policy.
Okay. No, I'm
We
not
work
saying we're
something
doing
out.
that, I'm just like, I'm just throwing at that, and I'm sort of channeling Julie, honestly, because Julie, God love her, this has been an issue for her for however many years she was on board. 12, which was that we have been failing our kids with what we offer them in world language. And I think that I agree with that 100%, and I agree with the idea of instead of getting rid of it because it's too hard because kids haven't had it until they're 14, we should offer it to them when they're 5 or 6. So that by the time they get to 14, they haven't seen it before. And I totally agree with the inequity of the fact that many kids do not get exposed to world language in 7th or 8th grade. My daughter would have been one of those kids actually, because her PSSA scores were too low to put her in Spanish in 7th grade, which was one of the reasons why I took her out of this district. And so I completely understand that inequity, but I want us to be very careful about how we go about addressing it. Because one of the things that I learned with that PSB trip to Germany was that, and this is nothing new, I mean, it's just the way that the United States thinks about teaching kids language. We are so, like, we're so behind. We're so behind. It's like embarrassing, actually. Yeah, it's embarrassing, and so I feel like we could really be thoughtful about this. We could do a much better job of making world language work, and it doesn't have to be, I mean, Spanish is obviously the one that kind of comes to mind, but it could be sign language, it could be ASL, it could be Mandarin, it could be Vietnamese, it could be, it could be Russian, it could be any number of things, honestly. And so I feel like that, and especially after having gone to the thing on Friday night with the alumni association. The thing that made me feel like, it also feel like a little bit was like, have we like kind of thrown in the towel a little bit on high expectations for our students? Like, just because things are hard or like kids don't do well, like, can we do better? Like, in terms of supporting our students and making sure, like, this language situation, that they don't take Spanish 3 times. I mean, that's not the student's fault, like, that's the system's fault. And how do we change that so that we're not expecting less of our students just because the system has been failing? I don't know the answer to that. I just sort of put that out there, but I just, it makes me like sad. Like, when my son, my son got to college, he said to me, finally, I'm at a place where it's okay to be smart. Like, it was not cool at CHS to be smart. And I just thought that was sad, like, sad. And so I think I want us to figure out a way that, like, I know it's not cool to be good in school or whatever, like, that's not like the cool thing, but like, I get it, but it's just, it makes me a little sad that like that was his experience, that, you have to pretend that you're not interested in school in order to be sort of to fit in.
Well, I mean, I would say that as the governing body, like, it's up to the board to really decide what that trajectory looks like. Because if you as a board decide that you want to put the resources, the funding, the time, the effort behind us creating a K-12 world language trajectory, I think that that's something that you provide the direction for and then we actually act upon. But I do think our office's responsibility is to actually elevate for the board the fact of the matter.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah.
understanding that, we now have an overage undercredited program that literally costs about $45,000 per child to support. And a lot of those kids are getting stuck in these loops around these graduation requirements. So if we have a systemic problem, I think you're absolutely right. We have to figure out what the underlying cause of that is and then fix it. I also think, though, that we have to acknowledge that our children think very differently about their futures than many of us in this room might have thought. And they need a little more in terms of support and direction than we have given them. I don't think that there is an absence of high expectation at the high school. I think that there is a massive amount of variety and it has not been organized. Children take all kinds of things. They're just all over the place. And then when they're applying and trying to figure out what's next, they figure out, oh, wow, I didn't take the things that could have prepared me for this next step.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. Yeah.
So one other thought, a few thoughts, I have several thoughts. I also have concerns about taking away the world language requirement, at least on a permanent basis. As an early childhood educator, I feel like I love the idea of giving our kids another language starting early on. I feel like all of the solutions are starting things early on. Obviously, it takes a while to see the impact of that. So that's why I say, can we make, adjustments for a certain time period and provide support in the meantime, like find ways to lift our kids up, and provide alternatives like ASL. I was thinking about kids who may struggle with like the actual reading and writing of things may be, right, more successful in a sign language class. And I know I did teach deaf and hard of hearing for third and fourth graders, and I had a teacher of the deaf as a co-teacher, and I had an interpreter. There were definitely a lot of adults involved. I'm not gonna say it was a cheap program that the Philadelphia School District funded. But the kids who participated in our class picked up sign just by being in the class and communicated with deaf and hard of hearing kids, our hearing kids. Back and forth, made lifelong friends. It's amazing. Anyway, so it's just one plug for that. I love boosting the health requirements. I just want to say some things that make me really happy. Because I'm in full agreement. Our kids are not getting enough health information, real information. They're getting a lot of
Their own information.
information and yeah.
Very scary.
And I think even like a health literacy course in and of itself might be like a good bridge to that. Like, how do I know what information I'm getting is actually fact-based information? I really like the pathway programming option. I know that scheduling can be such a nightmare, especially with block scheduling when there aren't 8 blocks to work from, there's only 4, and that kids who participate in orchestra are locked into orchestra and then can't ever take anything else that's only offered at that time. And so I'd love to see pathways that help kids who have overlapping interests to do all the things that they want to do, I know there are going to be limits. Whatever we put out, there are going to be limits. But like you said, we have so much variety in the electives that we offer. I just want to see our kids all have the opportunities to take those. And the other thing I wanted to say about GPA impact is sort of like, well, this is more of a question than a expression, but how are we currently factoring in? I know we're not doing class rank anymore, which is great. I'm full support of that. How are we factoring in dual enrollment classes? Are they weighted? Are the grades are the credits the same? Is one credit? Maybe you can just clarify when we say 1 credit, we're talking about a year-long course every other day, or we're talking about a semester course every day,
It
correct?
could be either of those things.
Either of those things
Yeah.
make up 1 credit. Okay, so I've already even had a kid go through the whole thing, but I just, for my own benefit. Okay, so then a half credit would be every other day for 1 semester.
Correct.
Right.
Or every day for a marking period. Because a marking period is half a semester. We have 2 marking periods in a semester, and we have 2 semesters in a year. So over the course of the year, you have 4 marking periods where you could literally get 4.25 credit
I
elective.
did not know that there were 0.25 classes.
There are 0.25
options.
credit options, correct. They call them minors.
That's a minor. I misinterpreted. I thought the minor was in every other day for 1 semester.
That could be a minor as well.
Could be.
Right, and I have a child who just graduated, so,
And I mean, it's
in the
very-
end, he managed his own thing.
I mean, it mimics a college schedule setup.
Right,
And I think the other part that we have been talking about is making sure that children have the efficacy to understand this system.
Right.
Because right now it's incredibly complicated, which is part of why I think kids get, they choose the things that
100%.
look familiar because they can't figure out how to schedule them otherwise.
right.
And when we get the course requests from the families in the spring, you know, we get them in February and it takes us 6 months to build a schedule.
Right.
Because there's so many things being offered and things are all over the place and you have these little quarter credit options, you have half credit options, you have full credit options, you have some things that are marking periods, some things that are semesters, some things that are full year, and all of them are 80-minute blocks, which based upon what we know about our kids developmentally is a very long time to attend to one subject. So there's a lot to be said for, really what we're seeing manifest at this, you know, really important developmental stage for our teenagers, because our teenagers are growing up in a different world and they're not built for the schedules that we've built.
If I can offer just a piece of information about the world language conversation with ASL, we've had that question come up when students are trying to, and they have been unsuccessful in passing Spanish, for example. Part of the barrier, unfortunately, is in the standards for world language from the state. The expectations of the standards around learning about the culture and the history of the place don't apply to ASL. So that's been the difficulty. We haven't been able to make that work because the standards expect this whole section to occur.
It has to be a spoken and written language.
Right, and that there's no cultural element, there's no historical element.
Actually, there are though. There's
Sure.
definitely a
But
culture.
in terms
Oh,
of,
no.
how it's usually taught, for ASL, usually it's just taught not as a world language in the same way. So that has been the hang up, is that we can't push the state then that we're meeting the standards expectations the way that they're asking. Their courses aren't usually designed that.
And to get to your question too, around the dual enrollment credits.
Yes.
In policy 214, computing grade point average, there is an AR that goes with that, and it actually does say here, credits transferred from other institutions, i.e. 2-year or 4-year institutions. Students who obtain credits at an outside institution will have the course reflected on their transcript as dual enrollment with the name of the institution, the name of the course, and a grade of pass-fail. These credits do not impact GPA calculation.
Interesting.
Extremely.
Do you have any follows before we go to?
I did, but I forgot what it was.
No, yeah.
I started to say about that. Okay, you can come back to
Yeah.
me.
So, quick question for the group. What do you call a person that speaks 3 languages?
Multilingual.
What do you call a person that speaks 2 languages?
Bilingual.
What do you call a person that speaks 1 language?
Monolingual.
American.
American.
Okay, that's a little joke that I had this year. And it was because everywhere we went, people spoke multiple languages. And when you talked about what struck a chord with me, Dr. Savage, is when you were talking about the age where kids really pick up language. One of my daughters was 10 years old, and she used to travel with a good friend of mine who was from Puerto Rico. So she would go to Puerto Rico every summer. The first summer she was there for a month. In 2 weeks, she was speaking Spanish. She had not spoken Spanish before she left there. By the time she came home, she could communicate with her friends that were there in full Spanish, broken Spanish, but full Spanish. Because at that age, they don't have that fear of trying and learning. So I think that in terms of considerations with the way that it's now taught, that doesn't work for kids, I think it is smart not to continue that. But I think that as a board, and for the few hours that I have left to have any level of influence, it would be to really examine how we started much earlier in our schools so our kids could be much more successful. And, without, we gotta look at cost and all those things, I get that, but I think that we do our kids a disservice not to have anything for them in terms of world language.
I mean, it could be a situation where the board chooses to keep the requirement, but then you actually back the program down.
Right.
Yeah.
Into lower grades.
Yeah.
But of course, we would, in the Office of Ed, we would work on a proposal around like what that would look like, what the impact on the schedules would be. Because the other consideration is, right, definitely the cost. the other consideration is right now in elementary schools, we have a number of these encore classes. And what does that look like for purposes of scheduling the elementary schools? Because right now we actually are overstaffed in encore classes. So is this a situation where we put something in and we take something else out? Or do we put something in and then we work the schedule so it works? We would just want some direction from the board around what the expectation would be.
And when you say overstaffed, there's more staff or is there more kids in those classes?
And that, overstaffed in terms of we have more staff. Our encore teachers in the K-5 level actually have holes in their schedules.
Oh.
Because,
might be an opportunity.
yeah, we actually have more, encore teachers than are necessary for the current schedules that we have built. And again, I think as we're looking at schedules moving forward, we do have some opportunity because of the staffing we have. And it's just gonna be really interesting to explore this because I think the community is chomping at the bit for something that's more feasible for kids. Because we want kids to be in school, right? We did instructional rounds this morning at Cheltenham Elementary School. It was lovely. The children were lovely. The children liked being there. The teachers were fantastic. They were fantastic. And when you think about what it means to create environments that students enjoy being in, part of it is that choice and variety, right? But we also have to be sure that we are creating opportunities for things that are necessary for kids to be successful as they matriculate up through our grades.
Right. Absolutely.
Part of what I heard there was keeping it as a requirement while acknowledging there's work to be done at the K-5 level. And
I would
that
think
would be
K-8 level.
K-8, K-8 level. But in order to do that, we would have to keep that as a requirement.
Sorry, I did.
No need to apologize.
Thank you. I did remember the thing that I was thinking before, which was, because we do have such variety, we offer so many, at many levels, electives, APs, the options are like truly endless. I really love the idea of creating a better support system for our kids to know what their options are and to be able to utilize all of them, that kids don't realize how many things there are. And I don't know if it's because of the system, like the physical portal that they're making their requests on. I remember going through that and like seeing all of the options. Yeah, right. And so if we're struggling to understand it, we can imagine how our kids feel trying to pick out courses. But I love that the pathway programming, in my mind, at least what I'm envisioning, provides a consistent support for kids as they're planning, almost starting in 7th grade, really. Because in my mind, the fact that we have block scheduling allows kids to take so many more courses than they ever could have taken before. They could take 2 maths a year if they wanted. I mean, the math requirement is one thing, but the opportunities are there. And so, I just want to make sure our kids understand that if they have a passion in something, they can go to the nth level of that and fit that into their schedules. I want to make sure we're building both pathways for kids to be achieving their highest potential and also supporting our kids who really need ways to get through. If it's Spanish 1, then Spanish 1 or whatever world language requirement, if we decide that is something we want to keep. I mean, I almost wonder about reducing the world language requirement, but not eliminating it altogether until we can figure out a way to build the program up from someplace. I don't know if I feel comfortable eliminating it altogether.
That's fine.
Speaking of pathways, actually, the state pathways
That's what I
to
was
graduation,
going
is that what you
There was
asked?
already-
Sorry, I wasn't.
No, good. No, yeah. No, yeah.
Do we need to sort of reflect that in this policy, or is there something we should be including?
So that,
Oh, okay.
Right, so we're all.
So that was part of why we wanted to adjust the language. So when you saw taking out the biology is required, government's required, it's a little misleading the way that it's written right now because the state requires that students take whatever is called the trigger course that's associated with the test. And then Act 158 gives them sort of like 5 ways that they could demonstrate proficiency to the state in those areas. We only had biology listed as the only requirement, even though really there's 3 different courses that they're supposed to have to take and pass. And 4 out of 5 pathways require that they've passed those classes. And so we needed to adjust that language as well. English 10 is the trigger course for the literature exam. Biology is the trigger course for the biology exam, and then algebra. We think when we were talking about why algebra wasn't listed as a requirement on there is that some students will have taken it in the middle school. And so having it as a requirement at high school would make the students have to take it twice. Right. Yeah, so that's why we took it off of there so that it was less confusing to people because it made it sound like only biology and government were the required classes and then everything else was choice, which is true. And then if we were to list everything that's required, that'd be a little bit behemoth.
Because the other part of the confusion I think that the counselors have in particular is because we like, and I can take it all the way back, when you look at these requirements, there's an assumption that you have to take and pass biology before you go into any other courses because of the wording of the policy itself. And that is how it has been implemented. So students go into 9th grade biology, semester 1, they fail it. They go into it second semester, 9th grade, they fail it. They go into it first semester of sophomore year, they fail it. Because they haven't passed it, they haven't moved on into these other science, classes that could satisfy these credits. And then all of a sudden you end up with this huge gap because that one class has filled multiple slots over the course of multiple years. So some of it has to do with the wording and how that wording has manifested into practice. And we want to make sure that we're not limiting students that way because, a family might, we do intend to still require biology, but some students might decide, hey, I'm going to actually take environmental science first, and then I'm going to take this discrete mathematics course before I take algebra. Like there should be more flexibility in how they take these courses, particularly because the prerequisites for the classes do not lend to a succinct trajectory. You can jump around because we offer so many things. So.
No, I think, I know that we're doing a pretty good job of explaining to families the state pathways and the different ways that you can achieve graduation, at least according to the state, what the state requirements are. I wasn't sure if we needed to sort of explicitly call out these in any of our policies.
There is a reference in a paragraph for the graduation requirement to the actual act.
Okay.
That brought about these Act 158 pathways. So it is there.
Okay.
But, naming it more explicitly, like we have instead endeavored to have, like I know our counselors have had nights with our families where they've explained it. They've been meeting with students. We put together a whole plan so that the counselors can meet with the students, establish what pathway you're on, and then keep track of it. It now goes into our student information system. Like we've done a lot of work around that just to make sure that students are meeting that requirement like prior to May of their year as of graduating. And we actually are pushing it back further and further. So now we want to start talking with sophomores around this because it's necessary to do so.
The other issue with potentially listing it too is that you have students who are in a Skills for Life program, for example, right? Listing biology, algebra, and English 10 as requirements. When that's unrealistic potentially for a couple of the students that we have, it can kind of trap them if we're not careful of the way that we list it. So by leaving it as the state requirement at the bottom, it creates the space for them. Because otherwise there have been some questions and some confusion about that too.
Yeah, and where unnecessary, we don't want to graduate students on IEP goals, right? We want to make sure that they are reaching and getting an actual diploma. So making sure the language in the actual policy in the AR is correct will eliminate that need. And obviously we report all of this data and this information up to the state too. So we want to stay true to what students need as opposed to trying to, generate the system so that, we can figure out how to get them out because the policy's been restricted.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm thinking more, I'm just me thinking out loud, like. I mean, if PSBA is not even suggesting that's fine, if it's just a reference to Act 158, just trying to think about when people, email us and say, well, where in your policies? Yeah, when a family looks for, where in your board policies does it say that my kid has to complete one of these 5 pathways, I wondering where we refer them to. That's all.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, I don't know if you heard the solicitor Ed mention he had some language, he might be over, or that you can.
I have some clients that have spelled out the pathways in a little bit more detail.
Okay.
We could consider that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just thinking for sake of clarity.
Sure.
And we do have a web page on the high school's website that actually speaks to all of the different pathways, and it's got, a nice graphic to it. So there is something out there, but I think you're absolutely right around being clear.
Yeah.
Because that's not necessarily what we mean by pathway here.
Right.
Right.
So,
It's 2 different things.
related, but
So
not.
we might even need to put together like a lexicon brochure so they
Yeah.
understand, because the Act 158 pathways, you're right, are very
So,
different.
Yeah. This is one thing.
Um,
Before, are you going before?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go. You go first.
Well, there was just one more bullet around.
Consideration, yeah.
Please get to the last one, right? I was just trying to get.
Not allowed.
Just, speaking to Epic and how this is affecting our students that are overage and undercredited, and that example that I gave around, students kind of getting stuck in certain courses and ending up in situations where they have to do credit recovery because they're approaching the end of their 4th year with us and they do not have the credits that they need. So we wanted to make sure too that the policy itself and the AR, even if we reduce the requirements, and again, we make that a floor, it just makes it feasible for more students. I think the other thing the board would want to consider is, like, if we do reduce the number of credits, would you be open to students graduating early? Because right now we don't have students that typically graduate early. That is very few and far between. Just because of the credit load. What we do end up is with seniors that come to the high school, either a block late, so they miss block 1 altogether. We call that late arrival because they don't have enough credits left to fill their schedule, or they leave early. They leave before block 4, and they end up with a shortened day.
Or both.
Or both.
Or both. Or both,
Right,
yeah.
right. And what does it mean for us to think strategically about how we actually are really filling that time for them? Because right now, a lot of them aren't doing much with it. So we have explored, like this year, we started a new internship course so that students can explore internships during the beginning and the end of the day instead of just being out there. What does it mean to really fill those courses with dual enrollment? Because that's what we've been doing, having students double up and take dual enrollment courses in the morning so they're not just floating around. How are we making that senior year more feasible and something that students want to do instead of feeling like they are forced to?
So I have a lot of thoughts. Okay, so my first question, comment is about math. And are our students required to take Algebra 1 by 10th grade? Like, can they hold off if they're able to take like foundational skills math, some kind of like operational math that can build their foundational math skills prior to taking Algebra 1? Can they do that? Is that something we offer now?
They can do that. We are seeing that is not often scheduled that way. The majority of the 9th graders who have not already taken algebra are scheduled to take algebra for 9th grade unless most of the time it's a student that has an individualized education plan that dictates they take a different course. But there is the possibility that they could move that course into a different year if they so chose. Because under the state guidelines, there's no requirement that they take it in 9th grade.
Right, okay. So I'm just sort of thinking about how to, again, build in success for our kids so that when they do take it, they take the Keystone they can move on with their lives.
Right. Well, I mean, there's also this algebra for all conversation out there in the world. A lot of school districts have moved to algebra in 8th grade for everybody, but again, that's a K-8 pipeline issue and making sure that all of the standards are covered.
Right.
That
Before
makes
you
that
get there.
feasible.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we hear the argument that the kid's not ready, to which I easily push back. They're not ready because you didn't teach it.
Right.
Developmentally, kids can handle a lot, but they need to have the undergirding foundational skills in math for that.
Yes, and yes, all about the number sense, all about number
Number
sense.
sense.
Okay, so on a separate, I love number sense in all the ways.
We did a whole thing to build some number sense this year.
I love it. I love it. They can't do anything without it. They really, it's so difficult to be successful in math and see yourself as a kid who can be successful. As a kid who wasn't successful in math ever, I married a math teacher because I was like, you can be the math person, I'll deal with the literacy stuff. Anyway, separate from the math, which is not my forte, but I'm thinking that those blocks, especially the early dismissal blocks, I know the late arrival blocks are like coveted spots for seniors because they get to sleep in. I know it was for my senior, it's something he very much looked forward to. But I'm thinking about community service and I'm thinking about internships, local internships with our local elected officials and things that like, you know, connecting with local businesses so that we can place kids, seniors who are interested. You know, I think that initially when I look at this drop of credit requirements, I'm like, are we asking enough of our kids? If we reduce by, this feels like a lot, like it feels like almost a third of their credit requirements. But I'm wondering how we fill those spots with something that's meaningful.
Again, completely up to the board.
Right.
And in many school districts near and around us, including in Philadelphia, there is a community service requirement for graduation.
Love.
That does not appear in our board policy or our AR.
Yeah. I would love personally to see our kids around our township giving back and participating and learning from the people that we have in our township and businesses, partnerships that we can create. I don't know, I just see a lot of value in that. And especially for our kids who are looking at other options other than college, apprenticeships, you know, working with professionals at any level. That just makes me feel excited for the possibilities for our kids.
Have some really great programming with Ms. McKenna and the Diversified Occupations Program as internships and CTE credentialing that happens. And then also Mr. Wennick is doing our senior internship program this year. And we actually, Mr. Hoff and I were meeting with them today to talk about what the spring will look like when students actually start interning, and talked about a student who has one class and then we'll get to intern for the rest of the day. So yeah, there are definitely some cool opportunities for kids.
And there is some freedom with that already in the graduation requirements. There is a paragraph here that says a student may qualify for graduation by attending a district school part-time when lawfully employed part-time or when officially enrolled part-time in a post-secondary institution. So there are flexibilities in the graduation requirements that you currently have that we just have to, I think, learn to work.
I'm sorry. I'm curious a little bit about the block scheduling issue. Wondering your thoughts about that. And whether or not you think it's something I just don't know. I'm curious just to see, we've had it now for how many years? Like 5 years?
This is the fifth year.
Fifth year, yeah. And sort of what the kind of general consensus is about how effective it's been.
And I think we have heard a variety of concern from teachers and students. Some teachers have voiced their concern around, especially like in advanced placement classes, that the block schedule actually resulted in a reduction of the amount of time that they had to work with students on very significantly dense content. So there's a thing there. Some students and families had voiced concern around the Keystone courses in particular being only semester courses and not school year courses. Just in terms of how much students can digest and, you know, remember and learn to manifest over the course of a semester or year. We've been speaking with the biology teachers in particular around like stretching that out because, you know, biology is a lot of memorization and that's harder to do in a semester than it would be over a year. We also have been talking with the administrative team over at the high school around like the mismatch of the schedule and why they end up with such small sections. And a lot of it is because they're trying to offer all of these courses, but condensed. So they end up having to honor course requests and they're, you know, having much smaller sections and having many, many more teachers and classrooms filled with smaller sections because we're not spreading things out over the course of the year. I think that there are a lot of varying opinions, but I think when you look at our actual data in terms of our assessment data, we see a lot, we've seen more growth and achievement in the higher end classes than we have the classes that everybody needs to take. And I think that's something we have to attend to. Because the fact that we have kids that are going through algebra and going through biology and hitting the Keystone, passing it, and then they're splintering off into all of the other classes. And we have kids, a lot of kids at this point that are getting moved into those classes before they actually can pass them is incredibly problematic because we are literally seeing an achievement gap that gets blown out and created after ninth grade. That was part of why we put the ninth grade academy in place because we were hoping to remediate some of that. And I mean, after this first year of data, we should see what that looks like. But I think we have to attend to what that looks like for our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, especially as we have so many more seniors coming down the pike. Now that, especially since the Keystone became absolutely required to take and the force pass needed to happen, it has affected some of our younger students more significantly.
I want to bring us a little back to the scope for tonight. Respect, oh, and you didn't even pull up that last bullet.
I mean, we've been talking about
Yeah. Well, the next one, yeah. So, yeah, please, you want to add in there?
I think you get the point around that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we would like to do though is really like hear from the board around what you think. Now, we've given you this introduction.
So, I mean, to be honest, I appreciate that you brought up the portrait of a graduate earlier in your remarks because, and if anyone rewatches this and you get to minute, 73 of this meeting, there's a survey out that you can still take around the portrait of a graduate, but some of the domains there are like community contributor and culturally competent communicator. And so in order to activate that portrait, we would then have to ensure that they can speak multiple languages or are already, active in their community and things like that. And so in some ways, the conversation that we're having, there's going to have to be alignment between the portrait of a graduate and the requirements. And so it seems like this is from Ms. Henry to Ms. Blissett and the head nods and everything. It sounds like world language, what community service actually looks like as a requirement is something not necessarily that says tomorrow needs to be finalized, but what can be explored. And it sounds like some things might already be explored at different levels. I did have a question around the under credit over age. And I think you've answered it a little bit in terms of folks who are getting into a loop of failing a class. But you mentioned a little earlier something around electives and overloading of electives on the schedule. Can you say a little more about
Sure, and I can take you back to the current and give you an example of this. It would probably be easier if I just went back, right? So you see where the electives are at the bottom where it says 9.5 credits of electives are required to get to this 28 credits total, right?
Yeah.
So if I am imagine that over the course of my freshman year in high school, I have the opportunity to take 8 different classes. One of those 8 classes is algebra. I take algebra in the fall, and therefore in the spring, I shouldn't have to take algebra again. I would take an elective in that slot. But I fail algebra So then I take algebra again in the slot where that elective would be, and it pushes the elective to the back end, because I still have to take the elective at some point. It's not like I have now swapped in math for the elective. I've just pushed the elective back. And that is how we get kids that end up with us for 5 and 6 years, because they are still trying to obtain these credits, even if they are elective credits, because the credits are literally just getting pushed farther and farther into the future. It's not like we're swapping them out for anything.
Yeah, okay.
And if I can add a layer to that too, that student also needs still the algebra class. And so now it's actually two
credits that are-
places that are a problem, and they still don't have the credit that they need. And so it's, even though it seems like because they have the opportunity for 32 credits and they are taking 28, and so it shouldn't be, what happens very quickly is it sort of double smacks them. And that's what we're seeing a lot of with all of the core content areas, because they need 4 math, 4 English, 4 science, 4 social studies. The moment that they fail one of them, it also takes the space of an elective that they could have taken, and now they need.
Both of those, elective and the other.
So you fail one course, you get rounded to 2 credits.
Credit dominant.
Oof. And then that could happen multiple times for
Correct.
one student.
And it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, that clears it up. And then as sort of as we summarize, as we have our Cheltenham pathways, but there are the Pennsylvania pathways. And so, but as we think about community service, internships, and things like that, we are essentially replicating those Pennsylvania pathways as Cheltenham pathways. So I say all that to say, because it's really encouraging, because I feel like at some point, we're not going to have Cheltenham pathways. We're going to actually have Cheltenham students. They won't have to know the difference in the lexicons. The way you get through Cheltenham, multiple pathways are also aligned with the multiple pathways with Pennsylvania. So I'm very encouraged, because I see that as our trajectory.
Trying to build
In
that
this conference.
alignment, absolutely,
Yeah.
and give them a sense of not just alignment so that you're meeting the Act 158 pathways, but alignment for what you have a sense you might want to explore or become after you graduate here, right?
So respectful of the conversation and considerations, and future educational affairs meetings that we'll have on these topics. Any other comments? Questions?
I'm still thinking a little bit about the block scheduling. Sorry, I'm wondering, if maybe, especially what I had heard a little bit when we first started with it was, the teachers felt like they weren't prepared to instruct students for 80 minutes at a pop. And I don't know if that's still the feeling, or if there's still work that needs to be done there, or I don't
I
know.
think there probably is still work that needs to be done there. I think 5 years in, many teachers have figured it out.
Okay.
But I also think when you look at the amount of instructional minutes, even in an 80-minute block over a semester, what you are asking students to do and prep for and attend to with a block schedule is different, because they are not necessarily getting little bite-sized pieces of knowledge over the course of a year. They're getting deep, immersive content and then going home and doing an hour's worth of homework in it as well. So for a particular class, they might be working for the 80-minute block schedule and the 60 minutes on top. So you're looking at 2 hours a day for a particular class for half of the year. And if it's a class that you don't like, or if it's a class that you're not particularly good in and you haven't found your foothold, or you haven't found somebody that can help you, it can demoralize children. Also for our teachers, as they are, working within the block and building educational experiences for students in the block, I think they are noticing that mesh that we have now, because we have students with shorter attention spans, with more access to technology, with more know-how around how to use that technology, and having them even maintain attention in a block that long.
It's a struggle.
It's a struggle. I mean, it's like asking a 5-year-old in kindergarten to actually sit still for a 45-minute ELA block. Right? Like, we wouldn't necessarily want to do that to them either. That's why we kind of,
Max 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah,
at a time, 10,
you gotta split it
15,
up,
and then,
right?
right.
That's why small group instruction.
Right. That's what I was actually, just one thought I had mentioned that there are some holes in our K-5 classrooms. I was just wondering what that could mean for small group instruction as well, to boost our kids so that they're ready for the next thing, especially the transition now to 6, 7, 8 is gonna be an interesting one. Anyway, that's just a separate thought, but in terms of scheduling, thinking about scheduling in our younger grades, how could we really utilize that time without overloading our kids?
Some of that is happening already.
Awesome, awesome. I got excited when I heard there's time, somebody has time.
And that makes sense, because I actually didn't see a edited policy. You said there isn't an edited version of the policy.
We started to work one out, but
Okay,
we thought
okay.
our presentation would be better because
Yeah.
honestly, I don't want to work up a policy without the board giving us direction around what a policy should look like.
Mhm,
Because it might be 21 credits, it might be 24 credits, it might be the 21 that we just proposed in this presentation, plus perhaps, you know, a digital literacy credit or a community service credit or something of the sort.
Yeah.
But I think the most important part of what we wanted to do tonight was to bring the concern before the policy committee, because obviously there's concern.
So I guess procedurally, do we want all that discussion to occur in our policy committee meetings? I think sometimes when we get to this depth, it takes sometimes a smaller group and then comes back, or are the policy committee meetings the place where we want to continue having? Like 21, 24, 28, or is this the best setting to have those?
We will move at your direction.
Okay, okay,
We
but
can take
okay,
it into
yeah.
educational affairs.
It seems like we're veering into,
Yeah.
yeah.
The discussion there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, one thing we have going in our favor with policy right now is we don't have a backlog. policy.
Okay, yeah, okay.
The last couple of months when we've looked to put an agenda together, we're like searching for the items, right? So there's space within policy committee. Ed affairs, the agendas are booked out for a year.
That's true, yeah.
So this offers space for the discussion. Like if the January 27th meeting has to be another discussion about just this policy, it's not setting us back terribly.
Okay.
And we don't have to send it to the agenda as like a third, first read, fourth, first read.
I think at this point, I don't. Yeah, I don't.
Okay, let's just
You-
discuss it. Marvelous. Alright. Just want to get on the same.
And that's why we did 102 in both places, because we wanted the other revisions to 102 to be able to move forward. But that world language piece is still in 102 because that's what is still in the grad requirements policy.
Correct. All right, thank you for that clarification. So yes, our next meeting, and that concludes our agenda for tonight. Our next meeting will be January 27th, 2026. I don't know if it's the first time, so not in your world, probably not. But yes, next year we'll reconvene unless there's another reason for us to do so. And so I'll.
From your online.
We're not there, right? You want to call us motion to adjourn? This is your last motion.
So moved.
All right, so you have a second.
Second.
All right, motion received and the meeting is adjourned.